Remarks on the latest US casualties. US President Donald Trump said it was a very sad thing and that their deaths were in service of the country. He added, "We're never allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon." Well, Ross Harrison is a senior fellow in the Middle East Institute and author of the book Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy, and joins us from Washington, D.C. Good to see you, Ross. I want to focus in on the US domestic view of this war and how that could be changing. We just heard from our reporter Heidi in D.C. saying that it's a deeply unpopular conflict. And when it comes to more US military personnel being killed, will support for this war with Iran be strengthened or weakened, in your opinion?
Well, there's always going to be sympathy for those servicemen and women that have fallen. But I think generally, if we look at the political logic of how Donald Trump became elected, part of the logic was that he would keep the United States out of forever wars and that he would focus less on the Middle East and focus much more on the domestic problems that have affected the United States over the last number of years. So it's not going to be popular. But I think one of the things we have to be concerned about now is whether, in fact, that public discontent, if you can call it that, will actually translate into political pressure, palpable political pressure on the White House, and whether the president will respond to that. That is unclear at this point.
Do you think that pressure is increasing? Do you think if it did, the president would respond to that?
Well, you know, I wrote a book called, as you said, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. I didn't write a book called Decoding the White House. So this presidency is very, very hard to calculate. But what I can say, Frankie, is that what we're seeing here is that both parties are using, both the United States and Iran are using military means to achieve political objectives. And I think in many ways, they're both miscalculating. The United States certainly is miscalculating in the sense that the belief is that just a little more pressure, just a little more kinetic action, just a little bit more economic pain will get the Iranian regime to capitulate. And that's not going to happen. Somebody that has looked at Iran for the last number of years, I can tell you that's unlikely to happen. And I think the Iranians also now run the risk of using the logic that may have prevailed during Donald Trump's first term, which is that it too, the Trump administration, would respond to economic pressure. But it's not clear that that's the case, that this is now a leader that if you want to understand the logic of this leader, I think you might want to be looking at political psychology rather than realpolitik national interest. And so the danger we're in right now in this sort of escalation dynamic is that both parties are looking for political outcomes, for de-escalation on the other side, based upon economic pressure and political pressure, and we may not see that.
Well, let's focus on political pressure in the US. Donald Trump clearly been trying to push internal issues, electoral fraud, the Save America Act, and we're fast approaching the midterms. How much time and resources has he got to continue to commit to this war? At some point, does the majority of his attention need to focus elsewhere? And what would you say that would mean for the conflict?
Well, again, Frankie, I mean, yes, the attention should turn. But whether well, first of all, you know, conflict dynamics have a momentum in and of themselves. You might have a political logic or political plan in going into a war, but once the war starts, the enemy gets a vote on how that war continues. So even if, as your question suggests, that he wants to pivot and focus on the midterm elections and on helping his party, if that's in fact a priority for him, the conflict dynamics might not allow him to do that. And that's the danger of entering a war like this, is that you might not have a choice but to focus on the war at a time when political imperatives should be suggesting you're focusing on domestic matters. So whether, in fact, the political freight train that's coming towards the United States in terms of midterm elections, whether that will affect the decision-making of Donald Trump in terms of prosecuting this war or de-escalating this war, that's something that remains to be seen. The pressure, the potential or the hypothetical pressure is there. Whether you get a rational response based upon that pressure, that's something that we're going to find out. And I think we should all be concerned that this may be taking on a dimension that is somewhat detached from the electoral politics that are going to be coming at us over the next couple of months.
OK, really interesting to get your thoughts. Ross Harrison, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute and author of the book he mentioned, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Frankie.